Holistaplan presents Tax Time with Jeff Levine. Let's talk taxes. Hello and welcome. I'm Roger Pine from Holistaplan, and I'm here with Jeff Levine. He is the Chief Planning Officer at Buckingham Strategic Wealth, also a member of our team here at Holistaplan as our tax planning strategist. Jeff, good to see you as we approach the end of the year.
Yeah. Getting close. We're getting close.
Now, you suggested we talk about the SALT tax deduction, which I thought had been talked to death at this point, but you tell me there's new stuff we ought to go through, and I'm going to believe you because you're always right about that sort of thing. So
that's like it's a lot of pressure now.
It is. It's going to be both relevant and interesting. So, oh man, so where are we at with SALT tax?
I think that's a good place to start. Where are we? So as we sit here, we're recording this on December 13th, right? So roughly halfway through the month of December, and Democrats are still working to push through the Build Back Better Act, which would contain a number of tax changes, including changes to SALT. Now, the House-passed version of this bill had a provision to provide some SALT relief. Notably, the House-passed version of the bill changed the top amount, the maximum amount that an individual could claim as a SALT deduction from its current $10,000 amount to $80,000. And that would be beginning in 2021. So actually retroactive to the beginning of this year, and then we'd have it for 9 years. In the 10th year, it would bring back a $10,000 cap on SALT deductions, in large part just to make some budgetary math work. Now, the House version, one thing to note about it is it capped the dollar amount, the maximum dollar amount of the deduction, but it didn't have any say over how much income an individual could have. Right. So
that was the criticism, right? Is that it benefits higher income people.
Mm-hmm. And naturally, the SALT deduction does anyway, as do any itemized deductions, because it's hard to get above the standard deduction today unless you're a high income taxpayer to begin with.
Right.
But SALT in particular, as your income rises, so too does your income tax in a state that has state income taxes. You tend to live in a little bit nicer house, a little bit bigger house, so your property taxes are a little bit larger, et cetera. So the SALT deduction is one that's kind of on the hot seat. But the House version, again, did not care about what your income was. So whether you had $400,000 or $4,000 or $4 billion of income, it would just said you can't take more than $80,000 of SALT deductions. Now, in the Senate, Senator Sanders as well as Senator Menendez from New Jersey have been looking at capping the maximum amount of a SALT deduction, or at least beginning to phase it down based on income. Now, there are some varying differences even amongst Senate Democrats. For instance, some want to start phasing it out at $400,000 of income. Some want it to be higher than that. But the Senate plan has primarily been let us just begin to phase it out at an income level. Well, the Senate over the weekend on Saturday, December 11th, released its first draft legislation of the Build Back Better Act, and it largely mirrors the House version. But one of the things that's different is the Senate version of SALT deductions literally says placeholder for compromise, right? Like it doesn't even give us any hint as to where they're going right now. It just says placeholder for compromise. So it is possible still that the Senate will adopt something that says, okay, we are going to, what we're going to do is we're going to phase it out based on the income levels. At some amount, it's going to begin to go down. There's also a possibility where the Senate and the House kind of get together and they say, 80,000 just seems like a big number as a maximum deduction. Let's make it, $30,000 or $40,000 as a maximum if you're lower than if you're above a specific income number, right? So they might say, hey, look, if you've got $400,000 of income or less, you can take as much SALT deduction as you want. But as you get above it, it'll phase back down to a maximum of 20 or 30 as opposed to where it is today, 10. All of that, though, leads us to believe that there still remains a very strong likelihood that whether we're looking at the Senate version of the bill or the House version of the bill, that a good deal of people will be able to take a greater SALT deduction this year for 2021 than they thought, right? If we're looking at the House version of the bill, then anybody, right? Anybody with a large salt bill might benefit. If we're looking at the pure Senate version, where anybody above a specified income, then it phases back down to today's $10,000 amount. That still means folks with $200,000 of income, $300,000 of income, $350,000, all of those folks would potentially be able to take larger SALT deductions for this year. And if there's a compromise, maybe it's not as great for those earning 700,000 or 800,000 as the House version, but it still means that they would be able to claim a larger SALT deduction for 2021 than they thought. The question then becomes, from a planner's perspective, right, which is primarily where, Roger, most of our advisors are concerned here, right, is what do we do as we head into the final weeks of 2021? Should we be looking at making any last minute SALT payments in this year, since a lot of those individuals will be able to claim a larger SALT deduction? Or should we consider pushing them off to 2022?
And similarly, I would guess, because itemized deductions are potentially back in play for a certain group of people who they might have not been before, we have to lump in our charitable strategy as well. And this is the time of year when a lot of people are doing charity. The two kind of go hand in hand now that itemized deductions are either back for good for someone who's like in a high income tax state,
Right.
where they're just going to be itemizing every year, and suddenly now it's less valuable potentially to do a bunch of monkeying around with charitable planning. Or if you're in a place like Texas, where suddenly you have the ability to kind of move income in and out of different years, like we can with our property tax.
Mm-hmm.
Now suddenly our charitable planning, if even for someone who was only giving $5,000 in charity or something like that, who is taking the standard every year, now suddenly that's back in play again. So at least we got something interesting to work with as we enter the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, this is last second tax planning that is totally keyed off of these potential changes. And so if we kind of walk advisors through this process of, what is my decision tree, right? If I'm an advisor sitting down with my client right now, or I'm on the phone, or I'm sending an email, what do I tell clients who have this option? And one thing I would say is, this is not brand new. It's just new for the last 4 or 5 years, right? Because before the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we used to do this all the time, right? The same way we talk about bunching charitable contributions now, we used to talk about bunching state and local taxes for maximum benefit there. It was just that after the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, with the very high standard deduction relatively, as well as the cap on $10,000 of state and local taxes, doing that bunching didn't really matter for a lot of folks, because no matter what, they had $10,000 or more of those SALT deductions every year, and they were capped out whether they bunched or not. Here's what we should look at going forward. So in short, does your client, or do you have the ability to push out payments that could be made in 2021 into early 2022? And there are two common places to look here. One is fourth quarter estimated tax payments for states with an income tax. So most states line up their estimate deadlines with the federal deadline. So for instance, if you have a client in New York, right, and they want to pay their New York State fourth quarter estimate, they can do that here now before the end of the year, and that would be a 2021 payment, or they could push it out until 2022. Right? They can make it within the first 2 weeks, by January 15th of next year. Similarly, a lot of folks have the ability to make property tax payments for certain jurisdictions, whether it's a town payment or a county. They might be able to make it late in 2021 or early in 2022, kind of the same type of thing. Those are the two places generally you want to look. And with that, if your client has the ability, the next question becomes this: if we see those changes to the SALT cap, would those extra payments, if they make them this year, be accretive to their already existing itemized deductions? In other words, if we take their existing SALT payments for the year, their existing mortgage interest for the year, their existing charitable contributions for the year, their existing health deductions for the year, right, and we add those all up, before we make any payments here before the end of the year, would those payments I just referenced be enough for that individual to itemize? If the answer is no, then likely we want to push out any SALT payments into next year, right? Because otherwise, all we're doing is wasting some of those dollars, just getting back to the standard deduction to begin with, right? If I said we have a married couple with a roughly $25,000 standard deduction, and so far they've got $18,000 of other itemized deductions. Well, that means the next $7,000 of deductions, whether it be SALT payments or charitable contribution, just gets me back to what they're already getting. I'm better off pushing that forward to next year. Now, if it is accretive to itemized deductions, in other words, if we add up all those things we just talked about, your client already is itemizing, then it goes back to just standard tax planning, which is, do I think I'll be in a higher marginal rate this year? If so, make those payments before year end, or next year. If so, maybe wait until January to make those payments. So that's really the decision tree. At the heart is, can I push those payments out? Are they accretive? Do they add to my itemized deductions fully this year? If not, probably better off pushing them out into next year. And then if they are accretive, then one more decision tree process, which is it a higher tax marginal rate this year or next year, and make those extra SALT payments in the year with the highest marginal rate. That's what advisors should be thinking about now with SALT payments here in the last 2 or 3 weeks of 2021. Always value to be added through good planning.
Yeah. Any concern that,
yes, I don't know what you're going to say, but yes, there is concern. I always have concern.
Yeah. I mean, I'll park that thought for a second, and I'll just say, like, if we are indeed pushing or pulling in tax payments into one year or the other, we want to move our charity the same way, through donor advised fund, or just waiting. Pledge the money now around the holiday season, and then write the check in January, or vice versa.
Absolutely. The same thing would go for those charitable contributions, right? Are they accretive to itemized deductions this year?
And let's get them.
Yeah, let's push
get them on the same schedule now too, right? And I mean,
Uh-huh.
this potentially is our new world again, back to what it was 5 years ago, and that's precisely what advisors were doing with clients then. The question I was going to ask is there a concern that well, I mean, this thing, it happened once before where one of these things passed on like December 31st or January 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Any concern that they don't give us the 2021 higher cap? In which case, that makes our math really easy. In which case, you just push it all into 2022. But of course, it might be too late to make that decision. So there is a little bit of risk, right? I mean, there's a little bit of risk of pulling anything into 2021, and it just may not happen. In which case, maybe you should have waited to 2022 in case there's still room. Or I don't know, is it?
Yeah, no, that's fair. No, that's absolutely fair. It would be for those who would potentially hit a cap next year on SALT still, it wouldn't necessarily matter because they'll cap out. But if you were going to be at, let's say they raise it to $30,000 as a maximum SALT, that's kind of, let's just hypothetically, let's say that's where they compromise, and you end up with $26,000 of SALT next year, but you made $5,000 payment now before the end of the year, thinking, well, I'll bring it into 2021. Yeah, you probably should have waited until next year to do that. And so, if you're on the fence and your client's kind of like, I don't know, you can always wait until next year. There's more of a reason to push it out for most folks than there is to bring it in, because if you're accretive this year to itemized deductions, chances are you're already going to have the same, like your itemized deductions for most folks tend to be relatively similar from year to year. Your mortgage interest may vary, but not all that much, right? A year more of principal, so it'll go down, but not, it's usually not dramatically different. Your taxes tend to be relatively similar because your property taxes may, go up 2%, but they're about the same. Your income tax, most people's income stays relatively close from year to year. So for most people, there's probably that push to that reason to push it out until next year, especially if you're concerned about a late year passage or even pushing this out until January of next year and they don't retro it to 2021. But there is a very strong push, particularly from House representatives, House Democrats, to make this retro to 2021. Many of them campaigned on that, and they want that in the books for this year. So we'll see. You know what? It's just another thing for us to keep an eye on, to watch, and to that's why clients need advisors, right? True advisors who are paying attention to this stuff, who are looking for these, shifting deductions. So a $5,000 or $6,000 deduction could be the difference in, $1,500 of income tax payments, maybe $2,000 if you count state and local taxes for some folks. it's meaningful, right? It's
Yeah,
meaningful
for sure.
dollars just to keep track of.
And I think, even if the dollars aren't meaningful for the client, you and I both know that clients notice that stuff, right? It matters to them to see that someone's watching this stuff for them. And so they just know that they appreciate that someone's looking out for them, even if we're talking about $1,000, $2,000.
When I see you care about my $2,000, I know you care
Right.
about my $2 million.
Right.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, you convinced me that salt was worth talking about one more time.
Oh, phew. All right. I can rest easy now.
It's going to be a tough sell in January if we have to come back to this topic, but we'll see. But I don't know. It's a moving target. So who knows what'll happen next? There's a lot of lobbyists and a lot of heated opinions about this. So I'm sure there'll be more fun stuff to talk about soon.
If there is, you can find it right here.
Right here. All right, Jeff. Thank you. This has been fun. And we'll be back next week with something more interesting to talk about. I'm sure another end of year strategy talk, because that's what we got to be focused on right now.
Looking forward to it, sir.